to Leitner. Puts it up.
You're listening to the Culture State Podcast.
Get ready. Woo!
Welcome back to another episode of the Culture State Podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Culture State Podcast. Oh, that was just off the top right there. Welcome back to another episode of the Culture State Podcast. I'm Chris Lee.
I'm Dennis Cox. Make sure you give us
a follow. You have to get musical for this show. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, 100%. We've had a lot of musical influence on this podcast, and actually some more episodes regarding the world of music in the state of North Carolina on future episodes. That's what we call a tease in the business, folks. But first, before we get to our conversation today, I'd like to remind everyone out there, get out there and get some Papa Murphy's pizza. Every Tuesday, $10.99, large pizzas at Papa Murphy's. Give them a follow on Twitter and Instagram at Papa Murphy's. Papa Murphy's, change the way you pizza. Now, Chris, as someone who's from the state of Virginia originally and has come to North Carolina and realized, you know what, great things can happen in this state. Much like when we had rapper Big Pooh on, born in Virginia, came to North Carolina, did big things, myself included, born in Virginia, come to North Carolina, trying to do big things.
We are the podcast radio version of Little Brother.
Yes, 100%. We are. Yeah. But did you know the song Wagon Wheel? Old Crow Medicine Show, which came out in 2004. A lot of people may have first heard it when Darius Rucker covered it about 10 or so years ago. We don't count that version because Darius Rucker's from South Carolina, because the song Wagon Wheel is all about getting to the land of the pine, thumbing my way into North Carolina. That's right. Ketch Secor, the lead frontman of Old Crow Medicine Show, is going to join us on this episode today. And Chris, he's going to talk about how when he was in high school, when he wrote the song Wagon Wheel, when he was in high school, his whole goal in his music career, he's like, I knew I had to get to North Carolina because if I wanted to play and learn the music that I really wanted to do, I had to get to North Carolina.
Yeah, man. And it's interesting. This is the first interview that I wasn't able to be a part of at the time, but going back and listening to the interview, like it's a reminder of other things. Like I remember you asking me one time about, what are some different restaurants? And I guess I kind of took certain things for granted. I couldn't think of anything, but you mentioned Tex and Shirley's, know, and that is like a big time rush. Like if you were from Greensboro, High Point, more than likely you've been to Tex and Shirley's. Where I lived at in High Point, there's a Tex and Shirley's that was like right there next to it. So the one I'm used to going to is the one in High Point. And and it's just hearing the different references and how highly he spoke of North Carolina, but also the Triad area. It was a good reminder for somebody like myself who's from there of the things that we have that are awesome that you don't necessarily think about because you're used to it all the time. You know what I'm saying? And so it was cool to kind of think about that and to hear that part of the interview for sure.
Well, if you want to check out Old Crow Medicine Show, they're actually going to be playing at the Carolina Theater on Thursday, December 2nd and Friday, December 3rd. I'm actually going to be at the December 3rd show. So hit me up at the Fan Rookie if you're going to be there. If you're listening to this before you get there, or if you're on the way to the show, hopefully you're listening to this right now on the way to enjoy the show. It was amazing how Chris, he talked about, he really kind of got the last of like the old true like folk music influences, like in the lifestyle that really bred that old folk music style. The one thing about North Carolina is a pretty eclectic mix when it comes to music. We've often talked about the hip hop influences, but the folk music influences in the state are also extremely big as well. So he talked about how he was kind of able, even at a young age of 18, 19, 20 years old, to really still be part of that last bit of that generation that really influenced that music in the early, when he got down into Western North Carolina around the year 2000, before eventually Old Crow Medicine Show got noticed by a gentleman big time in the state of North Carolina by the name of Doc Watson, before he actually was able to get out to Nashville. And also he talked about how it was like working in the tobacco fields while he was studying his music, or really cultivating the sound of Old Crow Medicine Show. So working in tobacco fields. Also just the about how during a time when like methamphetamine and like some of these other like narcotics had come into the western part of the state during the, about 20, 25 years ago, about how that stuff started to creep in and how he witnessed a lot of that stuff coming in and the boom that it took off. So it just not only just a music lesson, like history lesson from Ketch Secor that you're going to hear, but really a history of North Carolina lesson, and the reasons why by Sir Walter Raleigh was an influence on the song Wagon Wheel, while Bob Dylan was an influence on the song too. Just there's so much history that goes into not only this song, but just this song, but also just the sound that Old Crow Medicine Show developed.
And and one of the things I think is interesting too, you think about folk music, some of the origins of it and what it comes from, and the pain that people kind of put through their music based off of the lives that they live and the things that they see around in their communities. It's no different than hip hop, right? Yeah. And it's I think they just have different sounds. They're expressed in different ways, but there's a lot of it, and the spirit of it is very similar. Right. Oh, yeah. And so it's interesting to kind of hear about that and hear those stories and see what kind of goes into that music as well. The hard work, the pain, the labor, the family issues, the being low on the totem pole when it comes down to your socioeconomic status. It's all of that kind of flows into with it. It's cool to hear it from this perspective as well. But I think when you look at things like that from that perspective, you get a chance to really understand and really just hold value of where the music is coming from. There's a lot of real life situations that people go through, and and it's cool to hear it from this perspective as well. So I've learned some stuff. Like when you brought this up to me, I'd never heard of it before, but I know that I've probably been in places in a certain arenas or games or whatever where this stuff was being played, and probably missed it. And now I've gone back and I've listened and and things like that, and I'm starting to see like, okay, this is cool to hear this from the state of North Carolina. It just kind of adds on to the things that I listen to from the state. So it's cool. Transplant taught the native something. That is amazing.
That's right. Had to do it. And fellow Virginian, imagine that. Fellow Virginian, much like
well, my mom was from Virginia, so I learned a lot from her, and I love her too.
Exactly. See, again, great people doing great things in the state of North Carolina. That's what we do. That's why we come here, Chris, for greatness.
So you can actually do your great things.
Well, trust me, I had to get out of some places to do great things. I can say those things. I can say that. I could say these things, Chris. Also, one thing Ketch is going to talk about as well is when he was writing the song Wagon Wheel. Again, he was late teens when he was writing this, about how not only was his goal to get to North Carolina, but you're talking about like life and emotions and things you've gone through in life. It bleeds out in hip hop oftentimes. But in this song, he said, you'll hear him say, it's like, I was basically writing, it was basically an autobiographical tale of my journey in music to get to where I was and all the struggles and everything I had to go through to get there. They got discovered by Doc Watson playing in Boone, North Carolina on a street corner in front of a drugstore. That's where they got discovered. It wasn't like their stuff was out on the radio and someone picked it up or anything like that, heard it. No, they were literally picking instruments on the street corner in Boone, North Carolina, and that's where they got heard. It's amazing. It's an amazing story.
Well, you can hear more after this break. Ketch Secor. Sorry, I keep wanting to say secure.
I told you how to say
from Old Crow Medicine Show.
I got it. I know.
Yeah, no, it's like cocaine and Emmy. I needed a couple times to say it before I got there. You're gonna hear it right after this on the Culture State Podcast.
Old Crow Medicine Show, who's actually going to be performing at Carolina Theater in Durham on December 2nd and 3rd. I will be there December 3rd, so come find me. I'll be there. Ketch, thanks so much for your time. Really do appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
So
I'm excited to be on the broadcast.
Yeah, this is fantastic. This is a fun thing for me. So I was in college in the fall of 2004. I was a freshman. And later that first semester, someone came to my dorm room and said, hey, you need to check out this song. Plays it for me. Didn't know who you all were at the time. Plays me Wagon Wheel. instantly became one of my most favorite songs of all time. And I grew up in Virginia. But what was it about that song? There's so many North Carolina references, obviously referencing Raleigh, even the opening lyrics saying headed down south to North Carolina. What is it about North Carolina that you made the focal point of that song?
Well, Dennis, when I was in high school and I wrote that song, I had a career plan.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to get out of high school, which was in New England. Like you, I also grew up in Virginia. But I went away to high school in the state of New Hampshire. Anyway, when I was a senior in high school that fall, listening to all this Bob Dylan music, so much of it, in fact, that I could have majored in that subject alone. I was flunking everything else except for Bob Dylan when I was age 17. My career plan was to take a job in Greensboro at a pancake house called Tex and Shirley's so that I could do another job that didn't pay quite as well. Not that that job paid well at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the job of being a musician in an old-time string band out of Greensboro, North Carolina. And I had all semester long to think about how I had this job, being in this band, if I wanted it, and how badly I yearned to get out of New England and go to Greensboro, North Carolina at age 17 or 18 when I graduated, so that I could be a picker in this band. And so I wrote a very autobiographical song based on a lot of the Bob Dylan music that I was hearing, and on one specific song, an outtake of a Bob Dylan song called Rock Me Mama. Mm-hmm. And I wrote an autobiographical song about a kid hitchhiking to North Carolina because that was my story. And that's what I did. I did work at that pancake house. I did make better money than I was going to make as a band member, and I subsequently broke up that band.
All right. Well, you mentioned going to Greensboro. Actually, my co-host Chris is from Greensboro, so he's gonna be very ecstatic to hear this. But you made Raleigh the focal point of the song. Why choose Raleigh?
Well, as a kid, I was really fascinated with the Lost Colony.
Okay.
And so I was really fascinated specifically with the Lost Colony, but generally, I was just really interested in 18th century American history. And I was fascinated by North Carolina's history. It felt, I was from Virginia, like I said, so our history of that time is really well known. The histories of North Carolina was more of a rural place, and it didn't have quite the pomp and circumstance of where I grew up in Virginia. And so I looked to North Carolina as a kind of more wild backwoods frontier type of history. And so I identified more with that because I was, I wanted to be a punk rocker and take the path less traveled, So anyway, I got really into two key characters. I got into Francis Marion, the swamp box, who plied the woods of South Carolina and North Carolina. And then I got into Sir Walter Raleigh.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it had a ring to it.
Yeah, Sir Walter Raleigh. It's obviously a big name around these parts where we're located. So what is it about the North Carolina, or what did you learn about North Carolina's history that continue to pull you in?
Oh, well, it didn't stop there for me. After I wrote the song, I moved to Greensboro and then later to Rockingham County, North Carolina, to the community of Madison, or a smaller community that was unincorporated called Bethany. And that was in the Reedsville zip code. Yeah. So anyway, and then I worked in tobacco, and then I moved to the high country. I moved to Avery County, North Carolina. See, when I wrote Wagon Wheel, I had no idea that I was writing my own bus ticket to a world that I was about to spend a lot of time in. Like I've been to Johnson City one time on a Greyhound bus when I wrote that song. I wanted to make it Kingsport, but Johnson City had more syllables.
Yeah. Now, you eventually, with Okra Medicine Show, for those who don't know, you all actually started off, or much of your early years in the late 90s, working actually through upstate New York and across Canada, from my understanding. But eventually you found your way into Boone. You said you worked in tobacco fields. As the band, when you were in Boone, what was life like outside of playing music?
Well, it was great. When in the late 90s, having moved away from North Carolina to go to Ithaca, New York, where I was in love with a girl up there, I found a whole bunch of really great old time music, and we started our band there, and we crossed Canada. But then we wanted to get back to a place that felt more likened to the music we were making, and so we started casing Western North Carolina to figure out what town we were going to move to. So the obvious choice probably would have been Asheville.
Sure.
But I don't know. For me at 19, I thought Asheville was too on the nose, or there was like too much of what I liked there. And so instead of Asheville, we wanted to find more of a hinterland locale. We didn't want to be around anybody our own age. We wanted to be in a, Appalachian community. And so we ended up in Avery County at Elk Park, North Carolina.
Yeah.
And in addition to becoming a band in Elk Park, and then Boone, which was about 25 miles away, that was kind of the college town that gave us what Asheville would have given us. Living in Elk Park meant that we were around all these folks that were living in a folk life pathway that I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody living that way even now. It's like we got the last hurrah of the primitive lifestyle of the Southern Highlands. I mean, I don't know why we were lucky enough to do that, and that feels like a bold statement. Maybe it's not true, but when we would work in the tobacco fields, they measured them in lengths and poles.
Really?
They'd pull out this big corded piece of metal and unwrap it. This was all before cell phones.
Yeah.
This was before anybody used the internet. This was 1999 in Avery County, North Carolina, and Christmas trees and tobacco were still king.
Yeah.
And it seemed like all the young people had all moved away to go to college or work somewhere else. So it was a really fascinating time, and that's when we met the great North Carolinian, my most beloved North Carolinian musician, Doc Watson.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into that. What was it? Doc Watson, I believe, noticed you all on a street corner playing in Boone, or where you guys were at the time. What was like the first interactions with Doc Watson?
Well, it was his daughter who heard us on the street corner, and we had made corn whiskey the night before.
Okay.
And we had made it with this what is this the kind of show where I can drop expletives?
I can edit. That's totally fine. Yeah, I can.
Okay. Well, I'm about to tell you about making corn whiskey, and that's where the expletives pop up.
All right, let's hear it.
Because speaking of pop up, the thing that we also predated in the Southern Highlands was crystal meth. We were there before methamphetamines had really ruled the roost. We were there, and it was fascinating to witness the way that people were so lined up for the OxyContin explosion. We made corn whiskey and we grew dirt weed, and that was like being bad. But there were so many people that were taking Loratabs and any of those. God, what else did we used to take? Klonopins and all of those. Pharmaceutical drugs that were not yet the hardcore stuff that was going to result in this crazy explosion of drug addiction in this region. And not to suggest it's only a part of the mountains or only an epidemic in the mountains. Certainly there's that's happening all around the where you're from too, and particularly in Eastern Carolina, in rural places. But I just felt like I was in a spot to bear witness to the very first building of the tidal wave of addiction that was getting ready to crash over rural America. Okay. And man, it was very sad to behold it, because I go back now, and it's not the same place.
Mm-hmm. Now, so you said that Doc Watson's daughter was the one that noticed you.
Sorry, I digressed from my whole thing.
No, that's totally fine.
It's just because the guy we were making corn whiskey with was gonna die in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Of an overdose.
Yeah. So
anyway, it was the 5th of July. I know, because we made whiskey on the 4th of July. We took it from a steam distiller out of Linville, North Carolina. You needed to have me on this show for a long time now. I got a lot to say about North Carolina.
You can keep going.
All right. Anyway, it all started with us tying the rebar stakes for the new hospital in Linville, North Carolina. Y'all know this region. This is the Grandfather Mountain region, right?
Yep.
Well, we were working able body there, which is what they called manpower. A lot of day labor. I worked in High Point. I worked in Winston-Salem.
Sure.
Oh, I worked all over the triangle, doing in the triad, working for, day labor. Got a lot of gigs that way. Anyway, that's where I met this guy that was going to become a crankhead once the crank arrived. But up at this point, he was just sort of a guy that visited the doctor's office a lot. Got a lot of the good stuff from the pharmacists up in Mountain City. Anyway, we got this great big water distiller device, steam distiller, and we made whiskey over the course of it took about 2 weeks to make it, to get the corn beer ready. And we made it all according to, the old way of doing it. Made the corn beer in the bathtub and all that, drywall buckets. Anyway, so the day after that, all hung over and broke, we went down to busk on King Street because all the tourists come up from Charlotte. It's a Sunday. It was a good time. We were making about $200 when this lady walked by, and she was like, "Hey, I really like this. Y'all sound so good. My dad loves this kind of music. Are Ian's going to be here for a while?" And we didn't think nothing of that. And we said, maybe. And she came back about an hour later, and it's a good thing we didn't split, because she walked her dad, Doc Watson, right across the street. And he really liked eating at the Boone Drug there. They had a lunch counter at that time. And he drank us in with those great big ears of his, and on the spot gave us our first big break in North Wilkesboro, North Carolina the next spring.
So let's go into that big break. At what point you all, before you know it, you're performing in the Grand Ole Opry? At what moment did you all realize that, hey, just a few years ago we were making corn whiskey, and then now you're performing in Nashville at the Grand Ole Opry? Was there a moment of realization that what happened between now and then that we got here? We finally made it here. Was there a moment of clarity for you?
No, it really took a lot longer to kick in that we had left it's because when we first started playing the Opry and in Nashville, we kind of moved to the part of Nashville that was most like where we come from. Mm-hmm. And so we sort of traded a rural poverty for an urban one. And that was really fascinating to then live in a neighborhood where there was, a lot of prostitution door to door, and you always get a knock in the middle of the night, somebody with a gas can on your porch, and everybody carried guns, just like it had been when we lived up in the mountains. But now it was in the city, and it felt more hostile than it had up there, where it felt more clannish. More secretive up on the mountain, more desperate down in the city. So it wasn't for a little while until we got out of that situation and started making real money that point of clarity you're asking about came. But it was never lost on us that North Carolina had really been the proving ground of the band to move to Nashville. We were so interested in gaining a kind of cultural authenticity with which to authenticate old-time hillbilly music. And for kids from the 1980s who stood in line to get their first copy of Nevermind, or had been to Grateful Dead shows like I had in my teens, I really needed to sign up for a kind of hillbilly boot camp in order to properly authenticate the music.
Now, performing in North Carolina, obviously, clearly have a deep and rich history in this state. Does performing in North Carolina just have a little something special to it as opposed to performing somewhere else?
Oh, totally. It's because it's a region that's so synonymous with the origin story of the music that I play. Mm-hmm. I go to Gastonia, and I know that this is a town full of those Appalachian mill families who sent their sons and daughters out to work for a wage. And just like somebody might say, I'm the first generation of my family to go to college. The folks that populated those mill towns, like Gastonia and so many others, were the first generations of their families to leave and to go elsewhere to make a wage, to leave the farm. So I love that, and and playing in, up along the, playing down on the coast. I just feel the history at every turn. Every town in North Carolina has contributed to American music, and there are places that do that more famously, in Mississippi and in Tennessee and in Louisiana. But North Carolina's contribution to popular American folk music of the 20th century is largely unparalleled, and just a fantastic field of study. And you can just feel the echoes of those contributions in every town.
Who are some other musicians from the state of North Carolina that you would just love to not only share time with, but maybe even share the stage with?
One of my favorite blues singers down around the Triangle is a fellow named John D. Holman, who's probably been dead a while, but I got a chance to play with him when I was a kid, and of course there was the great African American fiddle champion Joe Thompson and his brother Odell, who were from Mebane, North Carolina, up by Burlington. I got to play with them when I was, 17 or something. He had a hog hanging in the smokehouse. I mean, it was otherworldly to get to participate in that. I would have loved to have played with the blues woman Algie Mae Hinton, who was from Silva. I would have loved to play with Etta Baker, who was also from West North Carolina, another great African-American woman guitar player. And then past the musicianship, there were so many folks that I would have loved to have met that were songwriters. And, one of my favorite songwriters is from Durham. And his name is Don Schlitz, and he wrote The Gambler, among many other songs. And
really,
Don is one of my songwriting friends here in Nashville. I saw him just the other day. So it's a really wonderful contribution y'all have made.
Now, outside of the music and the style of music that you play, are there other genres of music that may have influenced not only your writing and your playing?
Sure. I mean, I listen to a ton of rock and roll, and every punk rock, and the Beatles, and I listen to a ton of Bob Dylan. Yeah. And then I listen to a lot of Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard. I saw Randy Travis the other night in Nashville. He can walk now.
That's good.
Yeah, it's really, really wonderful to see his improvement. He's had just such a terrible decade.
Now, for you all as a band, I'm going to wrap up with this. I don't want to take up too much of your time. The band, you've all had a lot of different members come and go over the course of the better part of 25 years of the group. What is next for Old Crow Medicine Show in terms of the evolution of your music and the band and what you all are bringing next?
Well, the big change in Old Crow here is that we hired 2 new band members from North Carolina, and it made all the difference, man.
Better.
So when you see us next week in Raleigh, or we're in Durham, we're going to be bringing out our new lineup, which includes from Lake Norman, Mooresville, North Carolina, Mike Harris, who is a wonderful resonator guitar player and banjo player and picker, who has most recently been in Chris Stapleton's band.
Yeah.
And then also a really exciting young musician from Stokes County, North Carolina. And his name is Mason Vi. And Mason was somebody that we just heard about because he was getting popular in the traditional music circles, raised in bluegrass. He's about as old as the band is, about 23, 24. And so with these 2 new North Carolinian voices, I think we've kind of come full circle to the evolution of the band. And we recorded 2 records in 2021, and at least one of them is going to come out in 2022. So it's going to be an exciting year for us.
I'm definitely looking forward to it at the Carolina Theater in Durham, December 2nd and 3rd. Make sure you check out Ketch Secor and the entire Old Crow Medicine Show lineup with some North Carolinians added to the group. Ketch, thanks so much for your time. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for the press. It's been fun being on the show, and man, y'all are making me proud for the great state of North Carolina.
Hey, you're making us proud too. You're making us proud 100%.
Bam! Just like that. We want to thank Ketch for coming on and gracing us with not only his presence, but the stories of the state of North Carolina, just the experiences and things like that. So, this is, like I said, this is what this place is all about, man. This show is all about, is to highlight these types of stories from people who are doing great things, who are impacting pop culture, who are impacting the world of sports, who are impacting the world of wrestling. And they're all doing it, having some type of North Carolina tie, whether they're from here, they moved here, or just whatever it may be. So I want to thank him for adding on to that tradition.
And it was a cool thing Ketch brought up, the fact that he was so enamored or loved studying 18th century history of North Carolina and how that influences his music. That's one of the reasons why he uses Raleigh, because of Sir Walter Raleigh in the song Wagon Wheel. Who does that? Who thinks of I'm going to do some 18th century history of this state and it's going to come out in my music. And this song that just happens to go double platinum, with over 2 million copies sold for that song, whatever, no big deal. It's just, it blows my mind that it goes to that depth in terms of the influence, as opposed to oftentimes nowadays, unfortunately, at least my opinion, a lot of days it's just, all right, what song can I make now that's got a catchy beat that can, kind of catch on, so it can be like on TikTok or something along those lines. Like, it really is changing. I mean, let's be honest, TikTok and stuff is changing how music and stuff is made nowadays, but the realness and depth of music is what I really enjoy. This is why I love going back and listening to music that was older than what we're hearing nowadays, is because, some stuff is fun, but give me something that's real, because I'm going to feel it and I'm going to keep coming back to it.
Do you want some more 18th century history of the state of North Carolina?
Do I?
Well, I'm going to give it to you anyway.
Okay.
First president of Greensboro College, Solomon Lee, L-E-A.
Okay.
The last name L-E-A, of course. I mean, they were slave owners. But the last name L-E-A, of course, there's a town in Caswell County named after them. Leesburg. This is where my family came from.
Okay.
And so there's that connection there between that. And, and of course, the Lee family kind of did their thing, bouncing between, of course, based in Caswell County, bounced between there, Raleigh, there, and Greensboro. So I just think it's kind of interesting with my life trajectory and how things will kind of happen with that. So, there's some other things right there for it. I should probably write a song about all that.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
And ask Ketch to come on and just come on with us and provide the vocals.
Yeah, 100%. He would do it. I'm sure he would do it, because he loves North Carolina. He talked about in the interview just how North Carolina, by performing and why this state means so much to him, even though he wasn't born or raised here, the state's still ingrained deep in what he does. Catch Old Crow Medicine Show at Carolina Theater in Durham, December 2nd and 3rd, that Thursday and Friday this week. If you're catching this podcast, again, we drop these on Wednesdays. If you're catching it right now, go check them out. I'm going to be at Friday's show. I'm excited. I've seen them once before, Chris, about 5 years ago in Cary. They put on a heck of a show, and they have 2 new band members. Old Crow Medicine Show does, and guess where they happen to both be from?
North Carolina.
North Carolina.
I got to make sure I catch them at some point. It won't be this week as we're recording this, but when they come back, let me know so we can go to that.
It's a blast.
And you know what? I was thinking more about this. We talked about this on our radio show, Culture State Saturday, about a tour of Winston-Salem. So I'm thinking the perfect tour for you to have. All right. Okay. On a Saturday when there's good weather.
Okay.
Maybe in June or July. I'm going to take you to Winston-Salem.
Okay.
We are going to go get something to eat at Foothills.
Okay.
We're going to go stop by Dewey's, get us some square cakes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're going to go to Bowman Gray Stadium, catch some racing. This is where it all started, and the King Richard Petty kind of got his career kind of started off right there, and a lot of great racers came through there. After that's over, if Sweet Potatoes is still open, we might have to go eat at Sweet Potatoes maybe instead of Foothills. But after that's over, we can go to 4th Street and bounce around some bars, so that you can see that Winston-Salem is more than just a stop to Asheville.
Okay. More than a pit stop on the way to Asheville. Okay. All right. And it's a great place to stop if I'm heading up to Hanging Rock in Stokes County, which was mentioned by our good friend Ketch Secor. So big shout out to Ketch. But one thing we can do, Chris, obviously do that on a weekend, but on a Tuesday, we can stop by Papa Murphy's Pizza, $10.99 large Papa Murphy's pizzas. Right. Give them a follow on Twitter and Instagram at Papa Murphy's. Check them out for sure. Papa Murphy's, change the way you pizza.
Yep, and change the way that you rate shows. If you never rate shows, can you give us a rating? 5 stars if you're on Apple Podcasts. We'd really appreciate that. Also, we'd appreciate some follows. I'm at Chris Lee TV on Instagram and Twitter.
I'm at the Fan Rookie. Follow us at Culture State Pod.
It's there. It's up. And we're here to entertain and educate and create community. So thank you so much for listening to this Culture State Podcast episode. We'll be back next week with another great one. Of course, another great person representing the state of North Carolina. We out.
The Culture State Podcast, part of the Capital Broadcasting Podcast Network, with new shows coming out every Wednesday. Download and subscribe from wherever you get your podcasts, including the WREL Sports Fan app.